Welcome, or good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. This particular webinar, I think, is probably one of the most important that you can ever watch for your career. It will save you an incredible amount of unhappiness in the practice of law. It could save your life, depending on the way you're thinking about practicing law at the moment. And I will tell you that attorneys that I know that have taken themselves into incredible levels of stress, having heart attacks, nervous breakdowns, divorces, all sorts of horrible things that I've seen happen to people that don't follow the advice that I'm telling you today. So this is a very important webinar. And I think after this, you will have a much better understanding of how to approach the practice of law and the risk of some bad thinking and how to be happy as an attorney. And from what I've seen, what makes people happy as an attorney. And very interesting to me because when I deal with attorneys, it's often the ones that are pushing so hard to be successful and do their best in the practice of law. And they're really having a lot of problems that you won't necessarily have if you understand what I'm doing. And you certainly can be an exceptional attorney, but I want to outline the risk of that thinking and potentially you should avoid. So this is also a live webinar. So as you're watching the webinar, you should think of questions that you may have about what I'm talking about. Generally, you're welcome to ask questions about what I'm talking about in this webinar. But at the same time, it's important that if you have questions about your career and things that you should be doing or not doing, it would be very much in your interest to ask questions. I spend my days talking to law firms and candidates that are interviewing there. So I start my day typically at 6 a.m. and stop at 6 p.m. And I've been doing essentially this for 25 years. If you have questions about interviewing, your resume, how to position yourself, good practice areas to go into, markets that are doing well, who firms and places where it's easier to make partner than not, or how to increase your book of business as a partner, pretty much whatever questions that you have, I'm very happy to answer them. And when you do ask questions, it's very much helpful for other attorneys that are watching or listening to this webinar. And there are typically several hundred of you here. I hope that people have questions. A lot of people don't ask questions, and that's fine too. But learning from others is just a great thing. And when I was preparing for this webinar, I was just reminded of, how important this particular topic is, because so many people are just thinking about the practice of law in the wrong way and unhappy. And it's just very strange to me that people don't understand a lot of this stuff. And honestly, in terms of what I'm talking about today, I also made this mistake when I was practicing law. People that think this way often leave the practice of law rather than stay in it because the way they're thinking. So those are the things I'm going to talk about today. This topic will make a lot more sense once I start talking about it. And I do believe that regardless of who you are, whether or not you're a partner in a law firm, whether or not you're in-house attorney, a new attorney, someone in law school, fifth-year attorney, I do think this probably applies to you. So most attorneys, by the way, are average. It's very rare for someone to be above average attorney, to be not an average attorney. If you're not one now and you're exceptional, the odds are probably that at some point in the future, you will be an average attorney again. And if you are an average attorney now, it's likely that you will always be an average attorney. And you may start out as someone who seems destined to be an average attorney and end up an average one. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that this is when I place people. I love to take them from being average to above average to exceptional. And this is what law firms look for when they're better law firms are hiring people. But in reality, this is what happens. I try to push people as far as I can, but this is reality what happens. People do start their career very often, especially when they watch a lot of stuff that I do and they read and they follow advice and they package themselves in a way that law firms are going to be interested in, so they can start out as average attorneys and then end up exceptional ones. But I don't like saying that almost everyone's an average attorney, or if you're exceptional, you'll probably be an average attorney. But the odds are just stacked against you. It's just how it works. 50% of the attorneys that you encounter will often be better than you and some much better. And you have to figure out how to accept that. People react to being average in different ways, and I'll talk about that. But, if you don't want to be something other than an average attorney, which most people don't, I can tell you how to do it. I make my living by making people look like above average attorneys and bringing out the best in them. But when I talk about this stuff, most people don't necessarily follow it or ever end up as anything but average or above average. The above average attorneys and the exceptional attorneys are more than half of them are not. So that's just how it is. Now, the first thing I want to say, and I do think this is very important to understand, is that in general, if you're an average attorney, you're going to be much happier than very much above or exceptional attorneys. There's nothing wrong with being average. And obviously I'm into self-improvement. I've worked in the self-improvement industry. I understand it, but I just want to be very clear. There's nothing wrong with being average. And when I look at attorneys and I work with them, I'm actually convinced that being average is actually for most people that accept it, it's actually a very good thing. I work with attorneys from AmLaw 100 law firms, and they're often very concerned about prestige and not on how they look, and they're made to work long hours and all these things. And a lot of them, just because of the nature of that business, and I'm not criticizing the business, are unhappy. And people that are more average, meaning they're not necessarily at the most massive firms, they may be very talented attorneys. I'm not saying they're not, but they may be at firms that are the best. And I think, as a general rule, these attorneys are happier. I talk to attorneys in insurance defense and workers' compensation and personal injury and all of these practice areas immigration, all these practice areas that big firm attorneys look down on them. And I would say that the attorneys doing this type of work are much happier than the average attorney at these major law firms and that is working hard all the time. And the attorneys that I notice, that I see, that stick with the practice of law the longest, that are the most well-adjusted, that have the happiest families, the fewest health problems, the fewest substance abuse problems, and the longest careers practicing law are, from what I've seen, attorneys who are the happiest being average. So what does that mean? So today I was looking, every day I come in to work, and one of the first things I do after planning my day, which by the way is a very good thing, everyone should do it, and reviewing what you did the previous day. But after I do that, I review people that have applied to send their resumes to BCG the day before or that morning. And when I say the day before, from 6 p.m. when I start work until the time being, whatever. But what I see typically is I'll see several attorneys from major law firms that aren't working because it's very hard for major law firms or they're getting laid off or they don't have a lot of time. They've gone to top law schools and they're in a position where their practice areas slow down, or where they're too senior and that firm won't keep them around anymore, or where someone didn't like them or whatever and they're losing their job. And it's a general rule. I mean, I see more of that than with average attorneys are often just at the same firm and they want to move because they want more responsibility or whatever. But I see more sad stories than happy stories from the best attorneys. And attorneys that are at these massive firms often are the most competitive firms. There's competitive boutiques. There's all sorts of firms that can be very stressful places to work. And for the most part, these are the most unhappy people. I remember just not too long ago, I was talking to a senior litigator in New York that was like a 10th year attorney, and he wasn't getting any interviews, and he had a family, and I was at a major firm, and had he been in insurance defense or insurance coverage, personal injury, tons of jobs, but opportunities. But in his case, there weren't really any big firms that were interested in someone like him, and he had a mortgage and started crying. I mean, he was crying like sitting in the middle of a lobby of his office. So it can be very difficult. And when an attorney's outside of a major city, there's not the biggest firms most of the time. Sometimes big firms have offices in cities, but they're pretty much working with smaller companies and smaller clients. They may be doing corporate law or IP, but the clients aren't huge and there's not the same pressures. And in my experience, these attorneys are happier. They typically don't work as hard. Their hours, they're not surrounded by attorneys like in major cities who are unhappy and trying to get ahead, quitting and everything. There's just a lot of advantage to this. There's a lot of advantages to working in smaller markets around people that are more comfortable with their lives and their jobs. And you can do well. And if you're very smart, you can be the best attorney in that town. But I've seen in my experience that when you're outside of a major market, it was a major market, Houston, Austin, Chicago, New York, Miami. These are very competitive markets where there's a lot of competition, and it does make you a better attorney. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But if you're surrounded in these major cities by all these other attorneys that think they're better than you, better schools, all that kind of thing, you're constantly reminded of your lack. If you're an attorney that went to a Ivy League law school and you have to move from a bigger firm to maybe a less sized firm, and you have the salary, all these things are reminders constantly of what you're not doing or what your limitations are. And I think that older attorneys that are in those markets actually get used to that, and are able to do it. But for the most part, I would just observe, and I'd make this based on 25 years of placing thousands of attorneys in our company and working with thousands of people and spending all the time I do. I can tell you that if you are interested in working in a smaller market, you're typically going to be more satisfied with yourself and your life, because you're not surrounded by all of this stuff that the competitive attorneys are, things that remind you of what you're not doing right and what you can do better. And it's just, it can be very stressful for people trying to keep up with this. Now, again, I am an advocate of trying to make people move to bigger, better firms if that's what they want. But I'm just telling you, man, this is not something that's good for everyone. And most attorneys in the country are not on the coast or working for these giant firms. That's just not the case. We're talking about, I don't know what the number would be, but it's far less. It's less than 5%. So everyone's trying to be part of that 5% and feels badly that they're not part of the 5%, which is odd, because it's the same thing with law schools. Less than 5% of people go to the best law schools. You don't want to spend your life feeling badly about your law school, but a lot of people do. But attorneys that are trying to be significant all the time, a lot of them are hung up on the fact that other attorneys are doing better than them. And it makes them feel badly. Sometimes it makes them feel mad. Sometimes it makes them feel sad. The funny thing about personal injury attorneys, I'll just make this as an aside, is a lot of them didn't go to the best law schools, didn't get the best grades, couldn't get into the best firms, felt rejected and everything. And what's funny is, instead of getting sad, so a lot of people get either mad or sad. And so instead of getting sad, they get really mad and take out this kind of anger on companies and people that hurt their clients and file class action. So it's very funny. Sometimes not doing the best, you can get mad and do whatever. Great. Take that rejection and run with it. If I practiced law and I was in a major city and had worked in one of the biggest firms, and if I was not working there, I might be bothered and think I can do better. And that's just how a lot of these people are in major cities. And then if you're competitive, then you always want to do better. And you always want to get into a better firm. You always want to get bigger clients. You always want to prove something. And it's just about being significant. Everyone, by the way, has a need to be significant. So what does that mean? People will use religion to feel significant. They'll say, I'm a member of this religion and I'm going to go to heaven or whatever. Or I did this, I'm part of this special group. I got this award. And everybody wants to feel significant. Or I'm in this great relationship, or I'm great at this sport or whatever, but we want to be valuable and look others to think positively of us and think that there's something significant about us. Everyone, I think it's built into their DNAs. Like I said, religion, a lot of people nowadays do it with social media, where they figure out how many followers and likes and so forth they get. I don't know how anyone has time for this, but that's what they do. Some people will find significance through their families, like that they were from a great family, that they're part of the best social group, that they own certain things, some people cars, collections of coins, baseball cards, whatever. But people find significant through that. It's just ridiculous. Think about people driving around in a Rolls Royce. Wow. That if they're that's the idea of trying to look significant. And sometimes giant houses that are just unnecessary. I was talking to someone that was in Aspen, Colorado recently. It was someone in the real estate industry, and they said that what happens is all these billionaires go there, and Aspen, by the way, is just probably the most moneyed. It's just insane. $20-30 million for a 3-bedroom house, like in Aspen, on a small lot. It's just ridiculous. But people find significance in owning houses there. So billionaires will come there. All their friends will have a house. They'll go to their house, and then they'll buy something there for, again, $20-30 million or whatever. And then they may visit it once a year, but that gives them significance. They can say they have a house in Aspen. A lot of times attorneys' significance, and this may be you, and there's nothing wrong with this, but you will find significance in your salary. So getting the highest salaries, being on the Cravath scale, how good your law firm is, how good the clients are, your education. I can't count the number of people that I meet that when you meet them, they drop the H-bomb and tell you they went to Harvard. When you meet an attorney, they tell you what firm they're at, if it's a really good firm. They tell you all these things so you're supposed to feel that they're a big deal. And people want to go to great lengths to be significant to others. And by the way, I just wanted to do a quick aside. If you think salaries are important, in your first 5 years of practice, the most important thing is to have a law firm that's going to give you good experience, because you can use that experience for the rest of your career. So people will sometimes say, oh, I'm only going to practice for 2 years and make this giant salary, but that's not what's most important. What's most important is to go to a place, I believe, where you're going to get the best training, and hopefully that training will be enough that you can take it to another firm, or you can start your own firm, or you can use those skills to get clients, because it's ridiculous. A lot of times people go to these giant firms and they don't get that experience. They work on parts of transactions or litigation. But they actually can become much better attorneys in a lot of cases. But I just want to give you some insight into this. So trying to be significant, meaning I think if you look at your own life, there's probably a lot of things that you try to do to look significant, but doing that really can blind you to the things that you want to do, that make you happy, that makes you spend all your time trying to be significant. And then if you don't get what you want trying to be significant, then you start feeling badly about yourself, or working harder to be the best partner, or to be the best associate. And most of us, just so you remember, people die. And you die and no one remembers you. It's when you're gone, new people have taken your place. I remember anyway, it doesn't matter, but I remember when my grandmother died, I took all these banker's boxes of papers from the history of my family, which is hundreds of years old in this country. I'm not bragging or anything. It doesn't make me feel significant, but it's, you're talking about over 400 years of papers. And then I couldn't go through them. No one had gone through them. These are just writings and things when they died. No one's remembered after you die. Even if you come from, and it's very rare that our family had that, but it's just no one is remembered. Unless you're like a president or something, or a famous book. So no one, whatever you do, I'm saying is no one is going to, remember you. So if you want to spend all your time looking significant, which a lot of people do, it's meaningless in the end. And again, my family kept all these records, but no one probably gone through them, just kept adding them. So it's not a big deal. At my job, I don't look at this stuff, but I get emails all day, text, alerts from publications and all these things. And a lot of what I monitor are things about salaries, bonuses, partners getting these bonuses, and pictures of people on vacation, people writing best books and so forth. It's crazy. Like people take their picture where they are and try to impress you, or take a video and things. And it's just ridiculous. Doesn't serve any purpose. It's gratifying, but it doesn't necessarily fit any purpose. If I was an average associate in most areas of the country, I would probably feel badly about myself if I was dealing with people making giant incomes, and I could never hope to make, and I would feel like I was not doing enough. And when I see pictures of people enjoying levels of success I could never achieve, I have two choices. I can feel bothered by this or not. And where I live in Malibu, there's people beyond successful. Someone that I know that you socially just sold a company for $350 million. When I drive down the street, there's houses that are for sale for $50 million, $75 million. That's not something that I can partake in or participate in. And that's good. It reminds me that I'm average, but honestly, I don't care. It's just, who cares? I guess in terms of these people, I would be average, but it doesn't bother me. Who cares, right? I am what I am. The first law firm I worked at, I just want to give you some idea of how this affects people. Every single partner in the law firm was divorced. No, there might have been one or two. At the time, the law firm had grown to 60, 70, 80 people, but every single one of them was divorced. A good number of them had substance abuse problems, not a huge substance abuse problems, to be honest with you, but some. And their divorces, I believe, were caused by the fact that just this push to be the best, to help clients the most effectively, to be exceptional was what mattered, not their families and not the things that might be considered more important. And I remember when I was growing up, I was a bad kid in 7th and 8th grade, and I had friends whose parents were partners in large firms in Detroit, where I grew up, and their parents were never home, their father, and they were screwed up. Now they were hanging out with me. I was a bad kid. When attorneys in this firm worked very hard to be exceptional, other areas, of their life suffered. And when it's impossible if you make practicing law your number one priority, you're going to have to sacrifice something often in order to do it. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to be exceptional, because this is something I'm sure that a lot of people really want. And if this is what you want, I'm going to tell you what it takes. It's something that certainly I wanted to do. And I see attorneys literally daily trying to do this. And I counsel them how to be even more exceptional. But here's how you have to be exceptional. I'll just lay it out. The first thing you do is you really need to understand all of your weaknesses and work on every single one of them. It's not enough to be who you are. No, you have to know what your weaknesses are, because these weaknesses will be used against you. Because if a law firm is trying to make you a partner, that means that you want to share in their profits, and that's going to reduce the profits of other partners that are there. So they're going to look for weaknesses, ways to disqualify you. You would too if you were they, because you want to make more money and make it more exclusive. And so you have to do that. But you also have to do that if you're a partner, because if you don't have sufficient business, you're going to be reminded of that every day. So you need to list your weaknesses. You have to say, these are the things that I'm weak in client development, I'm weak in writing, or weak in whatever it is. You have to be very good at cataloging your weaknesses. So that means if you're trying to be exceptional as an attorney, you need to figure out all the time how to fix your weaknesses. And you always want to get into the best law firm possible. It never stops, by the way. Why do you want to be in a good law firm? Because a lot of reasons. It makes a big deal, for one. But in addition, being in a large law firm is going to give you a brand that you can use to attract even better clients. Once you get into a big law firm, you want to also attract the biggest clients and have the most power, and you're continually fighting that way. If you look at politicians, they never stop fighting. It's just how it is, and maybe something that you like. And one woman I placed at a $3 million book of business, which is respectable. I can do a lot better, but she had a $3 million book of business, and she's in her late 40s, and she's been moving to better and better firms. So she started at a smaller firm and moved to a bigger firm, and she always wants to be at a much more prestigious firm. So she's been building this book of business, and there's one law firm she dreams of being at. I don't know why. It's just she thought at one point that this was the best law firm anyone could possibly work in. So she has kept fighting to get into that firm, getting more business, and trying to be exceptional. If you want to be the best attorney possible and be exceptional, you need to, both as an associate and a partner, so I'm telling you, it never ends. You need to bill as many hours as possible, because You're going to be judged based on how many hours you bill and your ability to bill lots of hours and collect that money. So what happens when you're a partner? Oftentimes in some firms, they will circulate everyone's hours for the month. It's crazy. They'll do it for associates and partners. So everyone is aware of who's got the best hours and who's the standout. This is what happens. It just keeps happening. It doesn't end. It doesn't end when you're an associate. It doesn't end when you're a partner. As a matter of fact, for a lot of partners, it gets even worse. You're expected to make even more of a contribution than you did when you're an associate. So people that are partners often say, I wish I was an associate again because it's less stressful. Not only do you bill more hours, but you have to bring in business. And especially at the largest firms here, in the largest firms in the largest cities, this is your life. These people that you're competing against at this point are the people that went to the best colleges and law schools, that work the hardest, that are the smartest, that are the best, figure out how to be the best socially. This is what you're competing against. And because that's what you're competing against, you can't drop the ball. You need to be like all in and more all in than others. One quick story. I was quitting a firm. I've told this story to everyone before, but I was quitting a law firm and I said my friend and didn't make partner. And I don't remember what they told me, but it was something like they said, so-and-so that didn't make partner only billed 2,800 hours. And the person we made partner billed 3,200 hours. These are just crazy numbers. I could be off a little bit, but that's how they were measured. Who made partner? When you're in a large firm or any firm, you have to, if you want to be competitive and be exceptional, you have to not only be an associate, but then you have to get a business from as many large clients as possible. And this is extremely important. And I will tell you right now that if you want to do that, again, you can move from a small firm to a bigger firm and then a bigger firm based on your ability to bring in business and have clients that pay higher rates. But getting business is not easy. Attorneys that are getting business are not just going to work, but then instead of exercising or spending time with their family, they're trying to set up dinners and do networking and everything with potential clients. They will do that Monday through Thursday or even through Friday. They will invite people to go golfing if they need to on the weekends. I mean, this is how it works. You have to do this if you want to be successful, and it never ends. And you need to get businesses, it's the larger the firm, for the largest clients possible. And then you need to get them to spend as much money. So then you need to have the ability to get these clients to allow you to do as much work as possible without going away, and encourage them and tell them that you have to do all this work and get them to pay as much as possible for your work. That's the job. And I'm not saying that you're ripping people off, but the bigger the firm, the more thorough the work that the firm is going to do. So I was talking not too long ago with an attorney that I was a partner with a big partner in Los Angeles, and he had a massive book of business. And when I say massive, I'm talking like in the tens of millions of dollars. And I was doing what recruiters do, is meeting with him and talking to him. And he had been at the New York office of the Los Angeles office of a New York law firm. And he had gone to this firm and he did this certain type of transaction with middle market companies. And he said that when he brought these clients to his firm, that they were charging to do the work, this typical transaction, something like $3.5 to $4 million. So what he had done is he had moved to in order to keep those clients, because it was more important to him, then he had moved to the Los Angeles office of a Midwestern firm. And that firm could do the same work just as well for something like $300,000 to $400,000. And I said to him, what's the difference? And he said how big firms are with doing work and how they find a lot of things to be done. So if this guy hadn't been, meaning big firms will often, you have to get your clients to spend a lot of money to stay there. You have to get them to spend money on you have to get them to pay high hourly rates. Then they work the matters. And not all major firms, but a lot of them, they work the matters in order to extract as much money out of the clients. Now, that's not something I should be saying. It's not something that all large law firms do, but this is what happens in a lot of places. And it's just how it is. It's always been that way. And it's, again, It's the ability of the attorney with a client to get very thorough work done. And sometimes thorough work is necessary and other times it's not. But this is the game, guys, girls, and this is the game that firms are playing. So it's important to understand that the better you are at getting your clients, once you bring them in, you find work for them to do or things to be done, the better off you're going to be. So there's a lot that goes into being successful at major law firms. But the people that do these things are good at them. You have to sacrifice everything to do these things, even if it means that your health and social, family, and happiness. And the more you sacrifice, typically, the more you will succeed. And that's just how it works. And it's important that I bring this up to you because it's very important. Now, there are people that are able to very adeptly manage this and able to keep their wits and set boundaries and have those boundaries respected. But it's difficult. I'm going to be completely honest with you. It can be very difficult. And because most people get caught up in this and the competition and staying employed and having value and significance with their employer. Everything is important. This is important for you to understand. Everything, you're only happy in your life and in your career if you have purpose. And a lot of attorneys in largest firms and also other firms do find happiness. They get a sense of purpose out of meaning. Their life has meaning out of working in a large firm. And you can get this from any size firm. It gives you purpose and motivation. That gives you something to live with. That keeps your mind active. And it's good. It gives you a sense of meaning. And people enjoy having problems to solve and something to do and a reason to get up. And it makes their lives more interesting and meaningful and that sort of thing. It should be that way. And if you don't put yourself into something, meaning you don't have goals, you don't have a job, you don't have a job you enjoy, you don't see yourself improving in the work, meaning you always want to have something that makes you happy that you're doing. You certainly be happy with hobbies and things, but your job is what should make you happy. Your job should actually be fun. You should look forward to your job. You should get up early in the morning to do your job and want to get there as soon as possible. You should feel drawn to the work and look forward to doing it. This is actually something that I really want to make clear, that you need to do that. And I'll just tell you what I do now. Obviously I enjoy it because I just love it. But when I started doing this, I found myself getting up early and earlier, like 5:30, 4:30 in the morning to do it. And the reason is because I loved it. And when I was practicing law, dragging myself out of bed at 7:30 was an issue because I wasn't excited to go to work and I dreaded it. That's what's important. You have to love what you do and you have to have purpose. And so your job should give you that purpose. I know a family, a very wealthy family in Los Angeles that I knew them. I'm not close to them anymore, but the girls, when they turned 25, they were given millions of dollars. When I say millions, 10 million, something like that was invested for them to live in the rest of their lives. And none of them work. And all of them, no exceptions, became extremely unhappy in short order. And prior to getting this money, they had been motivated. They had been just very happy and bubbly, nice people. But when they got this money, they just became very unhappy. Prior to them getting this money, I went to their marriages, and they were, for all intents and purposes, it looked like they were in a position where this was going to go on the rest of their lives, just like their parents did. And their parents, by the way, came from another country and worked very hard to do well. And two of the girls that once they got this money got divorced in short order. One of them after the divorce, moved to an exotic island because that person promised a recipe for happiness. And all this was ridiculous because these were smart women that went to great prep schools in LA, that went to great colleges. And this was the last thing in the world that anyone could have expected. And then one of the girls that got divorced had all these affairs before getting divorced, meaning weird affairs, going to the local gym and meeting a trainer and just weird stuff, just having some guy come over to install carpet and just weird type things. And then they started going to all these therapists, wondering why they were unhappy, started taking all these psychiatric drugs and going to these retreats and for just to be happy. And then one of them, I'm not being prejudiced about someone gaining all this weight. But when someone goes from being very thin and stuff to a small, short person to weighing hundreds of pounds, it's just why? And it doesn't make any sense. And it seems like that's caused more by something external than, but it's not. Again, I've certainly in my life gained 50 pounds and football and things, but it's a lot. So the idea is that, and again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with us having this dramatic transformation within a year or so after getting all this money. I don't get it. And then these women all spent their days finding reasons to complain and feel sorry for themselves. And so I don't know that the money caused this, but what I do know is that once they got this money, they all stopped work. They stopped school, everything, they were done, and they lost their sense of purpose when they were younger. And I think that having all this money gave them something that made them go from not having purpose to having purpose to not having purpose. And so if you have nothing to do and keep you motivated and happy, then you're going to be unhappy. These women, they literally were unable to have this motivation to achieve anything in their lives. They lost sense of purpose. So they were the affairs and the gurus giving them happy. And I think probably the father thought he was doing the right thing, giving them all this money because he never had that. But I don't think it was a good idea. And he certainly had purpose and was constantly creating foundations and improving his business and being rich and not having money. And so took away their ambition. So they didn't have the same sort of problems that you would have and no ability to be exceptional. So they got purpose and meaning out of having personal problems. And when you try to do something in a law firm or trying to be exceptional, like I was talking about, it does have a price. You need to do more than the average person will do. And you need to do that. And for a lot of people, that's a very positive thing. It gives them, it makes them happy to a great extent. And if you don't have purpose, you wander around and are aimless and unhappy. So why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because a lot of people in large law firms become so stressed out that they drop out of the practice of law sometimes, or they just because that particular purpose doesn't apply to them. And then they're unable to find purpose doing anything else. And so if you don't have purpose, that's a huge problem. It did what it did to those sisters. It does what it does to lots of people without purpose. And if you think about people without purpose, it's a big deal. Sometimes kids, when you were probably in junior or high school, dropped out and lost purpose in school or sports and became burnouts, or dropped out of school or decided to work in a convenience store or a restaurant or something, lost their purpose. But the idea is it's very important to have purpose. It doesn't have to be in the best firm. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It's very difficult to work in the largest law firms, to succeed there, and to constantly be trying to do that or feel negative about what you're doing. First of all, if you went to a great law school, then that's a good thing. It will help you. But you have to remember that you take all the law schools together, you're talking about 30,000 plus people graduating from law school each year. And less than 5% of those people that are graduating, it might even be half of that, are going to the top 10 law schools. And then even if you go to a top 10 law school, not everyone is getting into the best firms. So it's true. I mean, going to the best law school, lots of people don't get jobs at big firms that pay a lot. It's how it is. And again, in the top 10% of law schools, the majority of, we talk about the top 25, the majority of people are not getting positions for the top law firms. So who cares? Really, who cares if you're not in one of these firms? If I wanted to play basketball, I wouldn't have a lot of luck being part of one of these groups. I don't feel badly. I used to play football. Wasn't exceptional. It wasn't by any man. I don't care. That just the majority of people are just not in these major firms and are making that kind of money. Who cares? Again, whatever. It's there, and there's very few positions. If you're trying to get a job in one of these firms, you're more likely to be unwelcome than welcome. You're most likely to be welcome as a law student if you go to one of these schools. If you do well, you will be at another big firm, or if the economy is in your favor, like corporate's expanding and There's not a lot of corporate attorneys, so you can move from a small firm to a bigger one, or a patent attorney at the right place in the right time, or ERISA. So most people do not, you are attractive to major firms when you have about 3 to 5 or 6 years of experience. When you get beyond that, it becomes very difficult. And then if you try to be partner, then there's even fewer. Your odds are even slimmer. Big New York firm, 100 people, 130 in a class, maybe 1 makes partner, 2 possibly, they stick with it. So there's just not as much opportunity out there, and you shouldn't feel badly. That's crazy. Again, I work with all sorts of people. I work with people in every practice area, a large and small law firm. And the best way to be happy is to really concentrate on being average. I'll tell you a quick story. This is just from someone I talked to yesterday. I talk to people like this all the time. I talked to an attorney in New York. He was calling me, Zooming me from Westchester or something. He's been unemployed for a year. He was in a series of big firms, including places like Skadden and the biggest and best firms. And he was several of them, 4 or 5. And he was in a finance type practice area and was able to stay employed for 12 years or something. And then he was let go at his current firm. He's been basically unemployed for a year and has thankfully, because which I guess is Bitcoin, has recently gone up. Now he has enough money to live for a year, but he is not going to be able to get a position, I don't think, because large law firms are not going to hire someone that's a finance attorney because they're unlikely to have work to give him and will be more interested in hiring someone that's for a 3 to 5 year attorney. And he is not going to be able to get a job, is looking into leaving the practice of law because he's only trained in one thing, area of legal finance. And it's crazy. He's going to lose a sense of purpose. Because he tried to play this game, but he's got a family, he's got a mortgage, and he's in bad shape. His career's over. He can't do anything anymore. And imagine the stress. I see it. I see people that try to do this and it doesn't work out, and they become very unhappy. And it's just very stressful. You lose your meaning. And when you lose your meaning, a lot of these people then often their spouses divorce them. They have a lot of problems. And it's something to think about. Whereas if you were at an average firm, you would probably start building business. You might not be in as sexy of a practice area, but you would really be able to do well instead and be happy and be secure and not have to run up against this wall where your career is over. It's over. What do you do? Very difficult. You got to think about that. And even if you go to a top law school, very few people become partner in these firms. It's okay. You might go in-house or be a partner at an average firm. But if you go in-house, that's even, I just want everyone to understand. So the way that it works is when you're at a large law firm, if you're lucky and you don't make partner, then you can go in-house. You will either get a job on your own or you will be implanted in there with help from the large law firm because you can steer business to them. Large law firms that often have no problem with their clients hiring their attorneys to do work because they know that attorney will probably steer work to them. But when you go in-house, it's very difficult because what people don't realize, not people dream of this, is that going in-house is extremely risky because companies, I'm sure you read, go out of business every day. I read the Wall Street Journal every day and read about companies filing bankruptcy that I thought were great companies. And then new CEOs are fired. If a CEO is fired, the new CEO will bring in their own legal team. If the general counsel quits of a company, the new general counsel will get rid of the existing legal team and bring in a new one. It's very hard to have any type of security if you go in-house. I just want you to understand that this particular dream that you may have is very difficult. Think about how hard it is to get an in-house job when you're employed in a large law firm and fresh and have all this knowledge, and then how difficult it would be to get an in-house job when you lose an in-house job. So people that lose in-house jobs, which is very common, just as common as law firms, often do not or have spent months or in some cases years, depending on where they are. And when I say years, it's very rare, but they give up because they can't get another in-house job. And if you go in-house, a law firm is not likely to hire you. It's almost impossible because you look like you're not going to work in a law firm that you want to go in-house. And then again, even if you manage to get a job in a large law firm, first of all, you're most likely to be a non-equity partner, which means it's essentially you are a salaried person, no different than an associate. And if you do not generate business or the firm runs out of work for you to do, you will be asked to leave when you don't generate enough business. So that's how that works. You have to step it up when you're a non-equity partner. And so the idea, I just want you to understand, is there's nothing wrong with being average. It's very difficult, even if you reach the heights of these, if that's what you wanted to do it. And again, it's impossible to be, if you want to be, almost impossible to get drafted in the NFL. If you're a good college player, it's almost impossible then to do well in the NFL. It's almost impossible to become a professional basketball player. So if you want to be at the height of anything, it's very difficult. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just, you have to understand what you're going to need to do. And if you're a stockbroker, most stockbrokers are average, most athletes are average, most businessmen are average, most doctors are average. And there's nothing wrong with this, meaning you don't have to be the top 2% of all attorneys and feel badly about yourself. Who cares? As long as you have some purpose in what you're doing, instead of dropping out or feeling badly, purpose is really what's most important, meaning serving clients and getting a good name for yourself. And so you have a choice, and you have to decide what you're going to think, how you're going to think about your life and your career. And it's like going to a great school. So one of my relatives, for example, went to Harvard, and as a lot of his classmates and friends went on to do like amazingly important things, write incredible novels, Eric Siegel or whatever, become a US senator, become like known CEOs and things in business. And so when this man was in his 50s, I remember talking to him, that wasn't too long ago. And he told me how badly, but he told me how badly he felt about himself because all of his peers had become very successful compared to him. And so he chose to be unhappy because he went to this great school, but didn't do best that what the best and most successful people did there. Who cares? But that's how he felt. So you should not feel badly about yourself because you're not at the peak. Does a college basketball player, when there's only a few spots for professional basketball players a year out of the thousands of schools that have basketball players? No, who cares? Most people are average. And this person who went to Harvard had a great career, very successful, got to do a lot of things other people couldn't do, but just not being as successful as other people he knew made him feel badly. Didn't want to go to reunions, who cares? He had a purpose. But the problem is he was comparing himself to others that were exceptional when he was more average. And so being surrounded and reminded of people who achieved more was tough. But you have to decide what things mean. And I will tell you that just because you're not on the top 2 or 5% of the legal profession doesn't mean you have to feel badly about yourself or that the odds of you being there are not good. You have to worry about yourself, and you cannot constantly worry about others doing other things or feel badly or second rate and judging yourself and those around you. And the reason I'm putting my hands in my eyes is because it's like attorneys are just so interested in who's successful. And I had this case not too long ago. It was in Florida, and it was a stupid case. It was like a breach of contract case where someone was alleging I breached a contract that I canceled before they accepted it, signed it. So I had this attorney, his first attorney I hired, and the firm that was representing the company that was alleging I breached the contract that they never signed was saying to me, "Woe to you. This is crazy. This is a big firm. You're always going to lose. They're so smart." And I was like, this is freaking crazy and ridiculous. But this is how people think. They think that if they're up against someone like a bigger firm, they have to respect them and they're inferior and they're never going to win. And it's crazy. You can't judge yourself against these people that are doing very well. And I'm telling you that when you do judge yourself against them, it may not be a good idea because they're getting divorced, they're having problems, they're unlikely to become partners in the firm. Even if they do become partners, they're going to be having quite a bit of stress associated with that and maybe not even stay partners. If they're in a very narrow practice area, they may do that for 7-10 years and then find out that they're completely unemployable because The only place they can do that is a few firms, and those few firms are going to prefer to hire people with 3 to 5 years of experience. So this is really, you have to understand that if this is all you think about is working with these great firms and stuff, that you're going to be quite disappointed. I was talking to a school on last Friday that wants me to do a presentation for, or a series of lectures to help LLMs get jobs in the United States after they come over from other countries and take these LLM jobs. And the craziest thing is I've been seeing there's so many freaking LLM programs in the United States, and they make a lot of money by taking fees from foreigners that think they can come over and pass the bar. And I guess you can take it in New York or California, maybe Washington State, if you're a foreigner, and work in a huge firm. That's all they think. So they think, okay, I've got this LLM. I'm typically good grades. I've got a 3.7 and I'm going to take the New York bar and work at one of the largest firms. And that's just absolutely insane. That's what they think. And sometimes they'll get a 1-year jaunt or something at a big firm, like they'll have a foreign program. Almost always, every single one of them is disappointed. And most obvious choice to not be disappointed and thinking you would be to apply to smaller firms. Completely obvious. Why do you have to apply to the 100 largest law firms in New York City? They are not going to be interested in you. Why don't you apply to smaller firms that need people? Most obvious thing, but no one does it. I'm insane. I don't get it. So they come over, they spend $70,000, $80,000 on this LLM, then think they can apply to only the largest law firms. They don't get interviews because these law firms are going to hire Americans. That don't need visas, that have JDs, that have been trained in all the torts and all the constitutional law. And it's just crazy. But the most obvious thing, if you want to work in the United States as an attorney, would be to apply to smaller firms. But thousands of them, maybe thousands and thousands of that. People come out of these LLM programs and they don't apply to smaller firms. I don't get it. I'm sorry, but it's crap. It's just insane. And then they feel like they did something wrong, wasting their money. Anyways, there's nothing wrong with you not being in these big, huge firms. And it's just, again, it's like professional basketball and things. And most attorneys are not part of that 1%, 2%, 3%. And who cares? A lot of times when they feel like they can't do that, they will quit the practice of law. They'll go in-house. They'll numb the pain by abusing substances or try to find other ways to distract themselves. I'm putting my hands on my head again because I remember I've had a couple different instances, several actually, but I was talking to this woman not too long ago, and she was in Rochester, New York, and had gotten an offer from a really good firm there. And after moving there with her husband and then taking a year off from maternity leave, and it was a great firm, and Rochester is a nice place to work, and you can live in a house that's reasonable. It's cold, but it's a great place. And so she got this offer, and then she said, I could never work in a firm that's these top firms in New York. I'll just look so stupid to my friends. And I was like, all right, people, and I can't have that on my resume. What the hell's going on? So literally gave up the practice of law with an offer because her ego said she had to be at a top firm instead of just like one of the best firms in Rochester, New York. This is how people think. I don't get it. It's like bizarre. Why would you completely give up a career that you're good at? And you have to be satisfied with not being the best. And if that's what you want. And if you want to do it, then that's great. Then you can. But in conclusion, the secret really to being successful is to really be the best you can be in the practice setting you want to be in. And it really comes down to how you talk to yourself and understanding that you're going to be happy in many cases and not worrying about working for the absolute best firm you can, and that it's just in feeling inferior to yourself because, again, you can have long-term success as an attorney by not pushing yourself in that direction. And again, there's nothing wrong with trying to be the best and succeeding. Absolutely nothing wrong getting a better first, but that's not for everyone. And it's just like, it's difficult. And I want to bring up another point that's kind of neat, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, because and it's insulting too. And I would be insulted if I listened to this, but I'm just flat out saying. So take the LSATs, you get a really good score on it. What does that say? If you get 10, it says that you have the ability to understand complex problems and come up with very quick, good solutions. And it's meaningful. I hired once someone a perfect score on their LSAT too that was very young, and meaning he was like 20 or something. He was just a savant, like child genius. And he was so young, he get hired by other firms. But this guy just ran circles around anything he was dealing with. He was dealing with workers' comp. He was dealing with a contract dispute, whatever he was dealing with. He would just get right to the heart of the matter and solve it and beat the hell out of any attorney from the others. When I say he got like a 180, he's someone kind of person that was taking like calculus. He was like 10 years old or whatever. But the thing is, when you're trying to compete against the smartest people, a lot of times, and I will just say that this guy would have run circles around me. Just how it is. You will often lose. So you can't compete at certain levels if you're just not there. And I will say, I certainly, when I was in high school, I remember for whatever reason, I got this just not a good grade in chemistry. I was a very good student, but then I just did not do well in chemistry and very upset about it. And when they were announcing all these awards for science prizes at my school at the end of my junior year, and I remember I got up and when they were announcing and pretended like it was me, like before they did it, because they were just trying to be funny, but I could never be a doctor. Right? It's just, I don't have that smarts. And then, so all I'm saying is sometimes it's better not to try to compete against the best. Why would you want to, if you're like not a good basketball player, why would you want to go play for the LA Lakers? That's crazy. You're just not at that level, and that's okay. So I'm just saying, you can't worry too much about trying to do something that you may not have the aptitude at. I knew a personal injury attorney that went to a 4th-tier law school that had to make an exception to letting him in because his LSATs were so low in grades. And now has planes. He has 2 planes, but one he shares with other people. But the point is that none of this matters. You can't measure yourself against standards that aren't really for you. And I'm not saying, again, I don't want you to believe that if you did poorly on the LSAT, you're not going to be a good attorney, because it's just not true. But if you're in some very cerebral thing like antitrust or very complex patent law, it's probably going to have something to do with your success, because you're going to be competing against people that might be smarter than you. I hate to say it, but it's true. So why would you do that? Is that good for your self-esteem? Imagine trying to be a quarterback on a professional team when you barely played when you were on college. None of this. You have to have purpose, and it doesn't need to be in a certain practice setting. And if you do that and you're comfortable making sacrifices, then you're going to be more successful. But that's not necessarily what I would recommend for everyone. You should enjoy yourself and be happy. You should find purpose in your work, meaning if you're finding yourself dreading going to work every day, which I know a lot of people are, then that's just not good. It's not a good thing for you. You need to measure your success according to what makes you happy or what works for you. And you need to find purpose. And your purpose, by the way, I've seen people, I remember I was dealing with this person not too long ago, and I was emailing back and forth about some matter with a case. And he was some guy that had gone to Yale Law School and written all these books. And he was working in this major law firm in an administrative capacity, meaning not practicing law, but just communicating with outside people that had questions and things. And he loved it. So that gave him purpose. Great. So you don't have to be necessarily practicing at the best position or in the biggest firm or whatever. You should do what makes you happy. And there's really nothing wrong with not being at the very top or even being average in your own firm. It doesn't matter. And it's what makes you happy. So I just would encourage everyone that you don't want to constantly measure yourself against others like this. And my complete belief is that you're going to be happier than in many situations rather than trying to be something all the time. And I'll just tell you another quick story. And I'm not going to tell the same story I told before, but when you look at people in smaller markets, parts of Georgia, parts of Alabama, South Carolina, Oklahoma, rural Michigan, rural Wisconsin, outside of big cities, or sometimes in big cities, and Quincy, Illinois, just talking about these areas that aren't huge. Most people join a law firm and they stay there their whole career and they're happy. So instead, a lot of people go to the frying pan in big cities and are extremely unhappy and stressed and thinking they're being the most successful they are, and comparing themselves to others, and they're just pulling their hair out and very miserable. And then they just say, hell no, I don't want to practice law anymore. I got to get out of here and go out of the house. And that's what happens to most people. But think about, like, how could one person that's so talented and getting these great SATs, LSAT scores and going to these great law schools be so unhappy? And yet the majority of attorneys in the country are happy. They're in firms, they like it, they get along with people. The other thing too, by the way, when you're a big city, you say you're an attorney, no one cares. I'm almost embarrassed to say I'm an attorney in LA because that's just, you're not in the movie industry, you're not whatever, or successful with some. And so in a big city, no one cares. Tell someone you're an attorney, you're like, oh, you're not a venture, you don't run a hedge fund. It's just different. You're an attorney in most areas of the country. People are like, wow, I know an attorney. And so working in different areas of the country is just fine. You can work in big cities and just be at firms that aren't going to kill you and practice areas and things. So I'm just trying to point out to everyone, I'm doing this, almost done with this presentation, but this could change the direction of your life and how happy you are. And so I'm trying to do it, and I'm trying to help you. You want to have a good life. You want to be happy. If you get married, you want to stay married, not based on having to work so hard in the job and ignore it. That's what you want to do. I would encourage everyone to really think about this and to focus on being happy and not trying to meet other people's expectations, and not trying to, and to just enjoy practicing law. And there are a ton of people that really enjoy it. I know lots of family law attorneys that love it, and they do it their whole career, and they actually make good money. And you can make very good money being a family law attorney. When I say good money, I mean, you can think about it. I mean, if you're a family law attorney, you're billing $500 an hour. It's very common to be able to bill at least 2,000 hours, even with your own firm, to work. It's $1 million a year. And I guess you pay a secretary and you make the office expenses, but I mean, you can make a lot of money. You can make a lot of money being a personal injury attorney. You can make a lot of money. When I say a lot of money, lots of money, $10 million a year. And I was watching this show recently, and this guy was giving a tour of his, this $30 million house or something. And he was young. He was probably in his early 30s. And I was like, what the hell's going on? Who is this person? And then at some point in the show, they said, oh, he's a personal injury attorney. And this guy was happy. He looked very happy, not because of his house, because he loved his job. And so you don't have to worry about as much. You have to just find something you like. And if you find a practice area you like, you're going to be successful. If you find something you enjoy, some people love being litigators at large firms, and they love it. But you have to enjoy it. And that's the most important thing, because if you don't enjoy it, it's just sucking your soul, and whatever money you make isn't really worth it. It's just a waste. And you want to enjoy it. Again, I apologize for giving so much detail on this and going into it, but I think this could be possibly for a lot of people one of the most important presentations I do here, because it can change your life. So we're going to hit a question in just a second. All right, so let's get to questions. As a reminder, you can pretty much ask any question you want. These looks like some pretty good questions. And anything that you have a question about, I'm happy to answer it. It doesn't have to be about this. I would love to do this in a format where people could talk about questions, and speak out loud. But the legal profession is just such a weird thing. People are very self-conscious about doing anything that shows any form of weakness. It's embedded in the legal profession. It's very unusual. They don't want to, but it's how it works. When you're an attorney and you're looking for a job, you can't you have to go in and represent yourself, just like you would represent a client. And lawyers don't respect other lawyers that necessarily aren't able to represent themselves. And they're always trying to hide weaknesses, almost like they would with clients trying to represent them. So it's very interesting how that works. Okay, so this is the first question. So I never realized that striving for exceptionalism could take my happiness until attending this webinar. I've been feeling increasingly dissatisfied despite achieving professional milestones. There's a way to prioritize my well-being while settling for effort. Okay, so the idea is that if you are in a position inside of a law firm where you're always going to be second rate or not respected, then, and you don't see that changing, then why would you want to stay there? So I remember when I was practicing law in large law firms, there were always these. I remember I was practicing in a New York law firm, Dewey Ballton is still in existence, but there were always these guys that kind of were just working for different partners that were nervous and always helping with things and schlepping things around and never really felt powerful. They were just almost jesters or something. They would follow people around. And it's sad because if they were in a different atmosphere, in a different environment, then they probably would be much happier. So a lot of times, if you're in a environment or a certain environment and you're never going to feel as successful or be as good as other people, then I don't really see the point of staying there. You're better off going to an environment where you're going to be more respected and be able to do well and have more contributions. I keep coming up with the example of a personal injury attorney, but if a personal injury attorney joins a giant corporate law firm's corporate department and doesn't have the skills or ability, then he's going to get blown out of the water and feel like a loser. And yet he does something else and he's on top of the world. So why would you want to put yourself in a position where you're buying in to something that you're not going to be happy doing? You should do something that makes you happy, and meaning you need to put yourself, you're not settling for mediocrity. What happens is when you go into an environment where you can excel, you're actually settling for being happy, which is a huge difference. You could go to an environment where you get this training in huge firms or whatever, and then you learn all the skills, and then you bring them into a smaller firm and you're knock it out of the park. And what does that mean? It means when you're a large law firm, and you learn to be very thorough, you learn how to produce very good work, you learn how to avoid problems, you learn how to do things in the way, and you can bring that to a smaller firm, like the best drink many times. You're not settling for mediocrity if you don't do things. You're settling for putting yourself in a position where you're going to be more respected and feel better about yourself than you would if you try to stay in that type of environment. So that's how that works. Let's see. Okay, so this question is asking me if I have any suggestions for firms in the Akron, Cleveland area to look for working in labor and employment or healthcare. These questions answering them is really not that difficult. You can just say labor and employment, and I don't know if you wanted to plaintiffs or whatever, but you could say labor and employment firms in, what was this? Firms in, what's this, in what area of the country? Oh, it's very simple. Here you go. You got all these firms here in Akron. This is awesome. So you have all these firms and from Flag Law and from BCG, and this is awesome. It's not that difficult to find places to apply. All you need to do, search Google and you'll find them. And the other thing I would say about this is, in addition to these lists, there's these lists in Google that'll give you even more places. Most of these firms, by the way, do not get unsolicited applications. So just finding one of these firms, and these are staffing companies, that's not really going to help very much. But you go here and Holland Myers and whatever the hell this is, and do they have a website? No. So that's not good. But look at these guys, just fun in Akron, Ohio. That's just a charming place to visit. So these are doing employment rights. This is their attorney. So if you were to apply to Jerome J. Lennon for a job, I highly doubt that he is getting people contacting him to help with employment-related work. He's just hanging out there and probably would love someone to help him. And then you can do the same thing with when you find larger firms. So you go into Forestater's a huge firm, but here's another one. It's a good firm. This is labor and employment. You can see here, this is pretty much all they do. They have, oops, what's going on here? I don't like that. I guess I got to fix that. But this would be a good place to potentially work. And then you look at who the team is. So you have all these people. Look at how great this is. And so you have all these people doing labor and employment law. This is, who do you apply to? You probably apply to the managing shareholder. So you could send John McKenzie an email or even a printed letter saying, hey, I'm very interested in working in Akron. This is why I'm employment. This is why I'm potentially a good place and everyone could fit and see what happens. What's interesting, by the way, too, I just want you to see that when you look at smaller firms like this, and you're not trying to be in the largest firms in the largest cities, look at these people and how happy they look. They're even putting up people that die. They just have so much respect. You're not finding that on older firms, but you're going to have people that retired that they're proud of. This guy is probably 80 years old. They're putting up there. They're proud of him. And then they have, look how happy these people are. This is crazy. Again, does this look like your typical law firm, like large law firm? Look at this. Look how slick they are. Just look at this. Everyone, they're just really happy. Look at that. Even the paralegal. So I'm just saying this, by the way, is a very good way to live and practice law where you can be happy. But how do you find jobs? And look at this. Even look how young she is and how excited she is. You want to try to find, when you're applying to jobs, this is what you would do is you would find your firms like this and build a list. You would build a spreadsheet with all that information and you would put them into a spreadsheet. And how do you do that? And what does a spreadsheet look like? This is just simple. I'm building a spreadsheet of people in different counties for whatever reason. I don't remember why. But you build a spreadsheet and then you contact those people and tell them why you're interested in doing that work. Simple as that. This is not that difficult to look at all these Word documents that can open. Yeah. So that's how I would do that. And then you can also use those 5 law lists and stuff. But Google is really a very good way to do this sort of stuff. So let me see this thing. I don't know why. Sorry, I'm having okay, let me see. Here's another question. And by the way, there's not really a lot of questions today, which is perfectly fine. But if you do have any questions, this is probably the last question I have. So if anybody wants to ask more before we end, that's fine. So it says, many firms and in-house jobs are being advertised as remote. Is it realistic for lawyers in small and mid-sized cities to get hired by remote attorneys in larger markets by law firms or in-house? Yes, it's very likely. So very likely. No issue. So get hired remotely at all sorts of places. It's not really that hard. You should look into, there's an article, just search for bar reciprocity, BCG search, and you can often get into the bar based on whatever in your background. You can waive in or be waived in to multiple states. Some of them are barred in Florida, California. You probably need to take the bar, but for most of them, you can waive in. It's not a big deal. Oh, by the way, this is just for anybody that wants to go in-house. Markets like California, where it's difficult to pass the bar, there's special exceptions for in-house attorneys. So it's actually not difficult for in-house attorneys to waive in even in California when you don't have to take the bar. All right. That's about all the questions today, even though there's several hundred people here, which is fine. And I will be doing a webinar next, probably. I may be doing an interview webinar, but I do, again, I brought this up last time, but I do resume review webinars once a quarter. I may be doing that. And if I do that, I will make sure that everyone gets a notification that was on this webinar today about the resumes and where to send your resumes. So thank you everyone for being on this webinar. I think it's a very important one. I hope you learned a lot. It helps you feel better about yourself and your career. Thanks again.